You are watching Real Simple News on Saturday, March 14th, and I am your host, Kale McCullough. You are watching Real Simple News. Sorry. Saturday, March 14th. Sorry. What's happening here? Oh, what the heck? Sorry. I don't know. Sorry. I'm your host, Kale McCullough, and you are watching. Real Simple News. Sorry about that. I had a whole bunch of other streams working because the stream wasn't working. This is the second time of me broadcasting this, and it was really good last time. So I hope it's as good this time. So top news story today. President Donald Trump declares a U.S. national emergency over the quickly spreading coronavirus on Friday, opening the door for more government aid to combat a pathogen that has infected over 138,000 people worldwide and has left over 5,000 people dead. And so if you do the numbers, if you do 5,000 divided by 138,000, you end up with a death rate of about 3.62. And that is a very, very high number because the death toll from the flu is somewhere like 0.01%. So this is like 30 to 100 times higher. And it seems to be targeting older people. So this story here is from Reuters. And there's two stories kind of the same. We're going to skip over to the other one here. As President Donald Trump declares a national emergency, the coronavirus pandemic pushed Los Angeles and Chicago to suspend classes, delayed two of the country's best-known sporting events, and triggered a run on food supplies in some grocery stores where a whole bunch of assholes wiped the shelves full of toilet paper because they had to make sure that they had like a year's worth of toilet paper because their ass is worth more than everybody's ass, and they just don't give a fuck. They really just don't care. Like, it's all about them. I'm sorry. Every single one of you people with a grocery cart full of toilet paper, clearing the shelves of toilet paper around the country, you're a jerk. So, moving on to the next story for NPR. Here is, it's about flattening the pandemic curve, why staying at home can save lives. From school closures to event cancellations, the disruptions are real and vital. It's all to slow the spread of the coronavirus so hospitals don't get overwhelmed so that they can treat the sickest people. So that's pretty much the game that we're playing here. Is there's only so many hospitals, there's only so many nurses and doctors. A lot of these nurses are older people, and they can't take care of everybody getting sick. But there's also a problem of, we also have an equal number of problems whenever we just shut the economy down. What ends up happening is there's two ways to become immune to it, which are pretty much the same way as you can take a vaccine to get immune, which is where they take dead viruses and they stick it inside of you. Or you can actually have the actual virus inside of you. And if you have the actual virus inside of you or the vaccine, it does the exact same thing. So there's groups of people who are going to be susceptible, and they're usually older people and immune compromised people. Everyone else has a immunity, or does not have an immunity to it. But the U.S. response that they're getting criticized for, which I don't know whether or not we could say that they're being rightly criticized for, because their response is we're just going to get herd immunity. Okay, so I think this is being misrepresented about what they're saying. So the U.S. has gone with more of a self-quarantine approach, and then I think some cities like New York declared a state of emergency. And so there's only so much in the U.S. legal system we can do because we're a free country. It seems to me like the people who need to quarantine themselves are like the older people and people who are in contact with people who are sick. But we can't really just shut the entire economy down because we're going to have a lot of problems down the road. And for a lot of people, they would much rather be dead than be homeless and on the streets. So like if business owners, like a lot of them, if their business goes under, will become suicidal, kill themselves. Startups and a lot of companies are very susceptible to being toppled. Even the biggest companies can be toppled by a labor problem, a disruption in the labor market, because they might have hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, but they also require hundreds of millions of dollars to operate too, and they're operating off of a margin, and it's really easy for them to stumble as a giant and to fall from a more nimble competitor who is able to overcome them, because that's the way business works and should work. So we do have to look at this pragmatically, because how soon can they ramp up the coronavirus vaccines that they're talking about? We've got some stories coming up here about the later about that. So keep tuned. Stay tuned. But the goal is to, at this point in time, try to just limit the damage that is done by what is called flattening the curve. And this is basically, they're saying it's a Gaussian curve that we're going to be looking at here. And so this is the two different Gaussian curves with different numbers in the variables that control it. And so we can just squash that, by 50%, which would be the equivalent of squashing the deaths by 50% by self-isolating. And I'm not sure about these draconian, like what's going on in Europe, the quarantines that like China has been doing. They're authoritarian, and then Europe is cracking down. It seems like Europe is kind of a little bit like they don't really defend their rights and their freedoms there. Like hate speech is banned over there, and you do have to kind of question these people whether or not the response that they're having is just like that's how they operate, because authoritarian governments operate they keep you in power by keeping people afraid and by fear and anger. These are like the two primary driving motivators, and predicting people's motivations is about what they're angry about, which is a lot of the problems that we're getting with these social media companies. Is they're using psychological techniques to use anger in order to manipulate you to read their news articles. This is absolutely not good at all. And we are risking this slippery slope where we're sliding into authoritarianism, because the left just wants they're so angry that things aren't fair and that the Republicans are racist, because far right, if you look up on Wikipedia, far right says that like it's far right because right is associated with racism. And this is a European term. And in America, this doesn't make any sense because the people who owned slaves were the Democrats, and the people who started the KKK were actually the Democrats. And so the liberals think that it's the Republicans who are the racist ones. But in reality, they're saying that because of historical reasons, and it's actually them who are the racists. So this term just doesn't really make sense. And whenever we allow these reactions, they're like, oh, just give up your rights. It's going to be good for you. It's going to save other people. It's going to make your life better. You got to question these people because they have a long-standing history of bringing about things like Nazism. Like, people think that Nazism is like far right because in Europe it was like the other way around, but it actually turns out it was actually the liberals, because the Nazis were, like, most of them were full-blooded communists, and they worked with the communists to overthrow the German government. And they were like, Hitler was a spiritual vegetarian. Like, this dude was like a total hippie, dude. So you got to watch this out for that stuff, because the generations, like, it's a different generation of people. They don't have these memories. They don't know these things because the history wasn't taught to them correctly. It was whitewashed. It was they painted it to look like it was just somebody else's fault. It wasn't any of their own fault, and that all that is good are the goody two-shoe people who are on the left, and then all that is bad are these people on the right who are conservative, who have these principles that they don't understand, and they get angry whenever you don't agree with them. And there's this guy named Steven Pinker. He's a very famous Harvard psychologist. I talk about this a lot on the show because it's a very important thing. And he did a study. He found that around the world, every culture has these 5 classifications of morals. There is self-protection, compassion, group loyalty, authority, and cleanliness. And each society puts different weights on these. For instance, in the Bible, it's illegal. It's a sin to eat pork. And that's because you used to, when you eat pork, you would get worms. And so cleanliness is, people get angry, like, if you don't wash your hands. And so that, to them, you don't think about washing your hands as a moral. You don't think about that, but it's a moral. And people get angry at you in certain situations if you don't do that. And it's because it gets sick. And it leads into the other one, which is the group loyalty and self-protection. So you're trying to protect yourself by washing your hands. So whenever somebody else is not washing their hands, then you get angry. And that's how you are able to then control the other person to get them to do what they want, i.e. wash their hands, or to not eat the pork, or to not criticize what the group is saying, like go against what the group is saying. And so the left gets really upset about fairness. If things aren't fair, they get upset. And if you don't agree with them, then you're the Nazi, and they get angry at you and they ostracize you. They block you right away. If you disagree with them on Twitter, like right away, they're like, oh, block this one, not even deserving my breath. And I don't know if it's because they can't debate and they just have to block because maybe like it's easier than typing, or maybe they just like, they get angry at you, but it's a moral to them. They think that you're immoral. But as it turns out, you just have a different weighting. You view these things differently. Like people in the Islamic countries, when you steal something, they chop off your hand. And to us, that is incredibly immoral because it's not fair. To them, you are violating the authority, and you are violating the group loyalty. And those things are weighted above fairness in those cultures. So you do have to look at, whenever Europe is doing something like going with whatever the Chinese are doing, you do have to look. You do have to understand Nazism came from Italy, right? From fascism. Well, hold on, it didn't. Well, the Mussolini was one of the big fascists. That's what I mean. I don't think it came from there because, of course, it came from like Hitler, right? But we can do this without having to have this authoritarian reaction. We don't really need it. So next story is from New York Post, and as it turns out, all 16 Dead Sea Scroll fragments in a DC museum are clever fakes. All 16, the fragments at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. are cunning forgeries. Independent researchers have confirmed. We're victims, the museum CEO Harry Hargrave said Friday in announcing the forgery finding. We're victims of misrepresentation. We're victims of fraud. The crummy brown fragments had been among the most prized exhibits at the museum. Some of them have been billed as scraps of the oldest known surviving copies of the Hebrew Bible. Man, sucks to get your hopes up, but yeah, this stuff happens a lot. So I'm not exactly an atheist, but I do support religions. I think that if that's your thing and it makes you feel good, more power to you. I 100% support you. Sadly, this is a repeating story. Next article from New York Post. Trump says outbound cruises suspended for 30 days over coronavirus outbreak. President Trump says 4 major cruise lines suspended outbound voyages at his request in response to the coronavirus outbreak. At my request, effective midnight tonight, Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, and MSC have all agreed to suspend outbound cruises for 38 days. Donald Trump tweeted, he added, "It is a great and important syndustry." I like that word, syndustry. And Donald Trump would know. He's been on the most lavish cruises that you could imagine. He says it will be kept that way, end quote. With that, I really want to check on my coffee real quick. Sorry. Forgot about my coffee. I usually drink coffee on this show. Next article from Newsweek. Ex-Judge Roy Moore files Supreme Court brief to urge end to marriage equality. He says, quote, "The foundation believes the framers of the 14th Amendment did not intend to protect right to same-sex marriage," end quote. The briefing said. I'm going to push back on him. Okay, so I grew up in a town called Charlottesville, Virginia, and it is the home of Thomas Jefferson. And so we used to go on field trips on Thomas Jefferson Day, which the lefties in Eugene, Oregon recently canceled because Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. But Thomas Jefferson believed that slavery was going to be phased out. He was a more benevolent slave owner. I mean, he wasn't a perfect person. He was a very noble man. He was definitely not a bad person. He's on Mount Rushmore. I mean, for God's sakes, the man is on Mount Rushmore. He's got huge statues of him in Washington, D.C. He wrote the Declaration of Independence and started the 4th of July. But they canceled his birthday in Charlottesville because some alt-right dudes had a protest there with tiki torches, and some white supremacists, some neo-Nazi groups came. You have to feel bad for any innocent alt-right people that were at that event in Charlottesville, because not all of them were actually the neo-Nazis. It was actually one group of those people. I'm not trying to defend them, but the media does portray them as demons. So, but what is my point here is that our founding fathers believed that the words were that all men are created equal, even though at that point in time, a black person was 3/5 of a man, which is ridiculous. But they believed that that was not permanent, that it was just the times that they lived in. And they did sow the seeds to free the slaves in the Constitution. So, given that the Constitution does not say anything about gay marriage, in the United States, in our legal system, we go off of precedents. Well, what are the decisions that prior people in the government, especially the founding forefathers, what did they do? Would they look in the Federalist Papers to go pull out some stuff of like, oh, well, when they were making the Constitution, they said in the Federalist Papers that when they said this in the thing, it actually meant this because they had this discussion about it, and here's the results. That's how legal experts come to a determination of how we're supposed to rule in uncharted waters. With gay marriage, the precedent states actually that we would then, if it's intolerance in the government that all men are created equal, right? That definitely includes gay men. It says in the Constitution you have a right to equal protection. And if you do have a partner, this person can sign legal papers for you if you're incapacitated. And that is protection. And our laws have to be equal so that we equally protect people. I definitely don't support you on this one, Roy Moore. Shame on you. With that, I want to go grab some coffee creamer. Sorry about that. I was ready the last time when I streamed the show, and it was much funnier. Next article from the New York Post. Road raging driver shoots man who cut him off and Park Slope. Apparently furious he'd been cut off, a road raging gunman shot out of his car and shot another driver in the head in Park Slope on Friday, shattering the afternoon calm of a quiet brownstone neighborhood, police sources said. The shooter then got back in his car and drove off, and cops were still looking. Where is it? The cops are still looking for him Friday night. The victim is believed to be in his late 20s or early 30s. He was rushed to the Methodist Hospital in critical condition. The shooter had been heading south on 6th Avenue around 5 p.m. when he'd hopped out of his car and opened fire on the victim, who was stopped in his white sedan between First Street and Garfield Place, sources said. I think it's really, really dangerous to have road rage. Like, out of everything that you... So I do computer engineering, and I programmed a lot of computers and, like, microcontrollers, and then, like, I've experienced getting angry at the microcontroller when it doesn't do what you want it to do. And if you want to completely derail your thoughts completely, just get angry. Like, if you're trying to do something technical, it really, really, really does the opposite of what you want. Because the moment you get angry, you just can't think. And then if things aren't going your way, you can't even do simple things. Like, you can't, like, something that would normally be hard is just like a pain in the ass. And that's what these people who get all angry, they don't have a lot of experience doing anything hard or technical. If you do have an anger management problem, I definitely would definitely implore you to start meditating more, because you'll find it actually really, really helps, because your mind just wants to just continue, just blah, 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 whatever you're doing, you're like just going. And then if things don't go your way, then you just like start ranting stuff. And then it's like occupies all your time. and you're just never going to get ahead, and you're going to like end up going off on somebody who ends up having way more power than you. It's one of the 48 laws of power to not insult random people. And it's because you never know who you're going to hurt. Like, case in point, whenever I became aware of the rottenness that is modern day third wave feminism, because I used to be a feminist a long time ago, until one day I realized that if I criticize feminism on social media, these people would attack me. Even people that I knew for decades, who I've never had any problems with, they will just turn on you and they won't like you anymore. And it's like leftists in particular are the most angry of the bunch, because a lot of these people end up associating with, like, because they're in the cities, right? Like, if you look at the electoral map here, let's look at this. Where's the thing from earlier? The maps. Oh man, you missed my trans story time skit. Damn. So if you look at the land mass here, most of it is red. And you got these cities where most of the Democrats are. And you can look at the scaling here. If you look at just the scales of how many people are there, you can see that in the population center, there's way more people. And so these people are going to try to use the argument that, oh, well, we're more educated because we're in the city and word passes around quickly because we're in more contact with each other. So that means we're smarter. This is the mentality. I know because I used to be a leftist. I know because I've said this exact same thing to people. Okay, this is stupid. It's not a good way to think, nor is it very productive. The reason why the founding forefathers put the Electoral College into place is because they knew this. They knew that they were going to try to free the slaves. They particularly were working with the slave owners because they knew they had to, because it was in our best interest to preserve the Union. The leftists don't. They want to just control everything, and if they get what they want, you're going to have these people in these cities where all these big blue things are. They make all of the rules for you, and then you don't get to make any of your own rules. And so why would any of us why would anybody want to participate? Why on earth would we want to be a part of the United States of America if our vote just doesn't even matter? And so this is why we have the Electoral College. And it's helpful because if you think about it, you know, in Nazi Germany, if they had the Electoral College, if like the people like voted for whatever they wanted, right, the Electoral College could just put them down. Like, it was a populist uprising in Germany before. I don't think a lot of those analogies to Nazism really actually applies anymore because we have the internet. So like there's some things that are like, you know, repeating stories in history about Nazism, but it's not really a fair analogy a lot of times. But what about the story? So this guy shot this dude. And these people just are getting all angry because stuff isn't going their way. It's not right. It's not fair for them. It's not fair. That's why they're getting all pissed off. So you got to call them out. You're like, yo, bro, that's pretty whack. Why the hell why are you getting angry at some random person? The way you should really look at stoplights is the entire distance is that I have to travel, and every single day, the amount of times I have to repeatedly travel all these distances. This really smart dudes who made the stoplights, they are really good at math, and they figured out math that makes it so that the time that I have to spend is minimum. So even if I have to spend a little bit of extra time at this stoplight, it doesn't matter, because the whole time in the entire system, it averages out. So I can just sit there and wait and be patient, and I don't have to get road rage at people, because if I do that, I'm not going to be able to do anything productive because I'm going to be angry. Next article from Reuters News. Major U.S. internet firms agree to not cancel service over the next 60 days. U.S. telecom regulators said Friday that major internet providers, including Comcast Corp., AT&T Inc., and Verizon Communications Inc., agreed not to terminate service for subscribers over the next 60 days if they were unable to pay their bills due to disruptions caused by the coronavirus. And so this is a public service to the United States, because they are keeping the pornography on while the quarantine is going on. In fact, Pornhub is even announced giving out free premium Pornhub memberships to people in Italy. Not sure if they're going to do that in the United States. So coming soon, you will have unlimited free pornography coming to you on free internet provided by Comcast, AT&T, and Verizon Communications that you can use to keep you entertained throughout this quarantine process, because that is the hardest thing to do in the quarantine other than finding toilet paper. Next article from Reuters. It says, U.S. should think twice before returning 1MDB funds to Malaysia. Ex-Prime Minister Mahathir said the United States should think twice before giving Malaysia back the money recovered from anti-kleptocracy probe into state fund 1MDB. Former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad said on Friday, as party accused of graft at 1MDB was back in power. And so this, I didn't really understand it when I first read it, because I did this show earlier today. What is going on here is that they returned some of the money. So it was $4.5 billion that was looted from 1MDB. And the U.S. Department of Justice was able to return $200 million of it already. They recuperated $1 billion, gave them $200 million back. But the same people that stole the money are in power again, which is a problem. Why on earth would we want to give you the money back if you're the people who stole it, right? You know, it seems, I think a court might look at that and say because it is a court who seized the money. So there is a fair case to be made to the court. They're going to have to take it to the court. If the court seized it, the judge is in control of where it goes. I personally am an honest broker. I wouldn't steal that money from them, but it does seem like if there is a risk of it going back into those hands, I do believe that it could be used to fund terrorism too. And so under our legal system, actually, President Donald Trump would actually have the authority there to intervene, because it would be a federal court system. And wait, hold on. Now, does that make any sense? No, the judge would be in a different. No, it wouldn't. He would be in the executive branch, right? Which is co-equal to the Congress, but is not. It is below the Supreme Court or the federal courts, at which there is the Supreme Court at the apex. So I don't know. Definitely seems like, a good argument to be made that maybe we should hold on to that money and that we should maybe make some money off of that in interest and give it back to them in smaller increments until their government is shown to not be corrupt, because it might cause terrorism that could actually affect us. That would make sense. Next article from NPR. Judge blocks rule that would have kicked 700,000 people off SNAP. The rule, which would take effect on April 1st, would have tightened work requirements for some food stamp recipients. But a judge said flexibly in food aid it was needed amid a pandemic. That makes sense. I'm going to have to say, we do need to tighten up the work restrictions. I know I myself have been guilty of violating, not working when I could have. And I can attest to the fact that women do not want to date you when you are on food stamps, because women are looking to date up. In the world, it is called hypergamy. Some people get upset when you talk about it because facts are hateful to leftists, but it is actually true that you can't really raise a family on food stamps, because women won't date you because, first off, they don't take food stamps at the grocery store or at the restaurants that you need to take the woman on a date at. I just spilled coffee. Oops. So, it does make sense in a pandemic that you would want to loosen the food stamps work restrictions, because it would definitely affect people's willingness to stay in quarantine. If somebody is poor and you don't have to go anywhere and you are fine on rent for a while, you probably should stay at your house for a while. You probably should stay on food stamps until this crisis is over. But if you actually want to have a girlfriend who is not 170 pounds, because in America, the average weight of a woman is now 170 pounds, and that is the average. And because most women are like 130 pounds, that means that most of these women are actually 230 pounds, and 170 is the average. So if you don't want to be with them, I would definitely highly advise you to not be on socialism, so that you can actually propagate your genes into the gene pool as opposed to being a cuck. Next article from the New York Post. Defense Department orders a domestic travel lockdown for service members and workers. The Defense Department late Friday halted all domestic travel for U.S.-based service members, civilian employees, and their families in response to the coronavirus. It's the strictest travel regulations yet for the department. On Wednesday, the DoD set a 30-day restriction on travel from the U.S. to China, Italy, and Iran, and South Korea again for service ... I didn't really care too much about this article, so I'm not going to go too much farther in it. Next article from the New York Post. Third person at Mar-a-Lago with Trump tests positive for coronavirus. Looks like Mar-a-Lago is a hotbed of coronavirus activity there in Florida, probably because of all the international travelers. The article says, from the New York Post, says a third person visited President Trump at his Mar-a-Lago resort last weekend, had tested positive for the coronavirus. Acting Brazil charge d'Affaires Ambassador Nestor Foster, who sat at Trump's table during the dinner at resort Sunday night, has tested positive. The Brazilian embassy said late Friday. Another Brazilian official, Fábio Weingarten, communications secretary ... I don't particularly care too much to go into it because the next article is so good. All right. It's from the New York Post. It says, critics question ethics of Ilhan Omar's marriage to embattled campaign consultant. The Minnesota's Democrats' critics are wondering out loud about payments that her campaign has made to the political consulting firm run by her new husband, Timothy Minette. And so, if you're not familiar with Ilhan Omar, she's a Muslim immigrant, and she was married to someone who people think is her brother, and Ilhan Omar married to her brother. If you look it up on Snopes, it says here that it's unproven, but Ilhan Omar has been under investigation for lying to the feds about the relationship with her purported brother. And she ended up leaving him for a campaign manager and spending a large amount of money on her affair. This Ilhan Omar woman sounds like a Democrat. Damn, tried and true. I mean, she doesn't mess around with that corruption stuff, dude. But must kind of say that with a caveat of it's unproven. I'm not trying to push any sort of conspiracy theories, but it does seem as though this one is a bad apple. And next article from NPR: as pandemic spreads, will there be enough ventilators in severe cases of COVID-19 as lungs become inflamed? Membrane that transfers oxygen into the blood can become blocked. Some hospital patients need mechanical breathing support to recover. So if you're unfamiliar, there is a respirator and there is a ventilator. And the difference between the two is a respirator is like it goes over your mouth, and it like you'll see them in ambulances. It'll have like a suction thing that you like push. You put it over their mouth, and then you'll go like this, and then that pushes, it breathes for them. And then the ventilators is the one where like you hook up babies if they're like premature, you hook up and you put a tube in your mouth. That's the ventilator. And so we're overwhelmed with our healthcare capacity. Hold on, we're not overwhelmed yet. There's a relatively small number of cases right now. But the problem is we can't ramp up our supply chain fast enough. We've been too reliant on the Chinese. We cannot just build these factories to make these medical supplies. The Chinese are saying China first. Apparently, America's racist for saying America first. But it's perfectly fine for China to say China first, because apparently Chinese are now a race of people. Asians are no longer just a race. It is now Chinese that are a race. And if you don't agree with everything they say, you are now a racist. Okay. See, this is the problem with leftism. It always gets perverted and twisted around and used. Like the Chinese are the most authoritarian thugs you can almost... Okay, they're not as gangster as Russians, but they murdered way more people with that communist revolution where they mass slaughtered 100 million people. And they what am I saying about that? I think I kind of went off on a tangent there. Well, we have to break our dependency on these people because because they're China first. Look, they have to be China first because their population is so large that they have to procure so much resources for their people that they have to say China first. And when they seem like they're being benevolent to help you, whenever they're giving these investments into these developing countries, they're trying to sell you something. They're not just giving you free stuff. There's a price tag that comes with it. And that's that China is going to come first. This is the problem with working with China, and they don't respect our trade, our patent laws, our copyright laws. They are more of a collectivist culture, and they do great at working for really cheap and at copying Americans. Americans still dominate them. A lot of people, there's this false information going around that schools in America are actually behind schools in Europe and Asia. And this is factually incorrect. This is actually based upon how much money is in your community, because our school systems are tied to local funding. And because they're tied to local funding, it means that the lower income communities are going to have lower quality schools. And the test grades in the wealthier communities are actually on par with the students in Europe. So there's a lot of bad information there. America is a very large country. It is a very large country with a lot of different states. And you can't just take one number and have it be representative of the entire country, because that would be like stereotyping a race based upon the actions of someone that you saw in a movie or a meme. And that would just be rather silly, bigoted, racist, and ignorant, stupid. This next story here from Fox News says researchers in U.S. and Canada uncover how coronavirus hijacked human cells. Scientists have uncovered how the new coronavirus binds with human respiratory cells to hijack them to produce more viruses. The discovery by researchers at Westlake University in Hangzhou, China, and University of Texas at Austin is important because understanding how the virus enters cells can accelerate efforts to develop treatments or even vaccines to stem the pandemic, to infect a human. But we still have, even if you the problem with ramping these things, like we're going to get herd immunity by the time the production ramps up. Like it's going to take them a year to do this. That's why people are wrong to just bash Donald Trump for his response, because there's only so much the government can do without declaring martial law. It's like an emergency. I think most people look at this and say it's absolutely not that way, because the fact is that the flu continues. Okay, so the flu has a 30 times lower death rate, but it comes around every year. So after 30 times, the death rate is the same, correct? Math doesn't make sense to liberals, right? It doesn't. I'm an engineer, so I caught it, right? But to these people, they go off of fear. It's a reaction because it's the moral. They have a moral of fairness, and that you have to, this is the blending of those Steven Pinker's universal morals that I love to talk about all the time, because they are everywhere. It's like basic calculus formulas. Like once you know them, you see them everywhere. You see how they grow and the different factors, and then, but that's the same thing with those moral classifications. You start to see them, how the liberals are using anger in order to get you to then side with them to not be fair. But then in the end, when you're fair to everybody, you're fair to no one, except for the people who are stuffing their pockets with loot while they're blacklisting you and all of the people who worked so hard in their lives to get where they're at because they posted a racist tweet on Twitter. Definitely has happened to me. I've had so many people try to call me racist because I don't support illegal immigration or overrepresentation in immigration. I think that if we do allow immigration, we should have an equal amount of immigration from every country, and it should be a number such that it's biased towards the native inhabitants of the people of our country, because, well, that just makes a hell of a lot of sense to bias the rules towards the natives, right? Why on earth would the natives vote for anything else? But what am I talking about? What does this have to do with the binding of the thing? So they discovered to infect a human host, viruses must be able to gain entry into individual human cells. They use those cell machineries to produce copies of themselves, which spill out and spread to new cells. And then your white blood cells. What happens? I talked about this yesterday. Last time, no, it wasn't yesterday. I've been putting together the studios, new green screens, two studios. And the way the immune system works is they're endocannabinoids that are in your cells. They work as flags that your white blood cells then come and they sniff out the bad cells, and then they consume those cells. And then the cells are flagging with the endocannabinoids, which are similar to cannabinoids. And I forgot, I'm making a clarification because I forgot. I was like, oh, is it cannabinoids? Endocrine? Endocannabinoids is what it was called. And so these, you can actually, that's why pot helps cure cancer, is because the cannabinoids allow the cell to be able to actually flag the cells that are bad to have the white blood cell eat them. So fascinating. I learned all of this stuff doing AI biomimicry, trying to mimic a human immune system. Fascinating stuff. What's this next article here from CBS News? It says public spaces, grocery stores empty amid coronavirus fears. While the federal government works towards a solution, the coronavirus pandemic continues to disrupt daily life overnight. Apple said it would close all of its retail stores in the U.S. and around the world outside of China until March 27th. Meanwhile, people participating in social distancing as precaution has led to emptying of public spaces throughout the country. Michael George reports on how hard-hit New Rochelle is handling life under the new normal. And so this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. We can deal with this pandemic a number of different ways. We can deal with it where we can freak out and shut everything down. Or we can look at it a little bit more pragmatically of there is no COVID-20. So the flu is deadly because it keeps coming around. It keeps mutating every year. And then there's a 0.02 death rate. But then you start to multiply it, 0.01. And then you start to multiply it, and then it starts to get up to the same death rate as COVID-19. But it targets specific people. But the flu mutates every year. There's no COVID-20 yet. So we don't know if this virus is going to mutate. It's an unknown. Because of that, we probably shouldn't destroy our economy. We shouldn't. This is why the liberals are crazy and why you should totally not vote for leftists, because they operate on fear and anger, and they're going to overreact, and they're going to do things that we shouldn't do. And case in point, electric cars. So everybody thought electric cars, this was going to be the golden ticket. That's what's going to stop global warming. As if we just stop all these polluting cars and just replace them with lithium-ion battery cars. And this was not well thought out. As it turns out, all of the other factors involved with it, such as creating the new charging station infrastructure, the transitioning from the cars, the disposal of the battery, mining of the lithium, all of these things have a very bad result too. The cons end up outweighing the pros because you end up having all these losses in the system. And when you look at the amount of chemical energy that a gas engine can hold, and you look at the most efficient engines that we have, then it's not looking so bad. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy an electric car. They're very nice cars, but the amount of times you need to recharge the battery means we're going to run out of lithium-ion batteries. So it's a short run. It didn't end up actually fixing the problem in the end. In some areas of the country, there's green energy. I'm in Eugene, Oregon. Almost all of our energy comes from the Willamette River. And so here, an electric car definitely helps. We're in a valley here called the Valley of Sickness. It's the Willamette Valley. It's a joke. It's the Willamette, but foreigner outsiders say Willamette. So sometimes I like to joke about that, and sometimes I can't even say it right myself. But we're in between two valleys. We have really bad allergies here. Some jerks are growing grass seed because all these people in California and everywhere else buy our grass seed because it's the grass seed capital of the country. Yay! And all of this, all this smog is just like bad. So, you should, get an electric car, but it's not going to save it. What does this have to do with this article? The leftists are going to overreact, right? With the electric cars, we're like, people a lot. They even like getting angry at people for like not getting electric cars. Like, you're not getting the environmentally efficient option. You're such a bad person. You're a Trump supporter. That means you don't care about the environment. This just isn't true. It was all hype. And that's why a lot of Republicans don't really believe in global warming, because a lot of older people have been around for a long time. People have been talking about the end of the world's coming. Like, if it's not nuclear annihilation, it's going to be the hole in the ozone layer, which the hole of the ozone layer is responsible for 50% of the Arctic, the ice in the Arctic melting. So I guess that's like still global warming if you look at it, actually. But after so many of these fear waves, you just eventually you're like, okay, well, the planet's been warming for a long time. Like, how much of it did we do? How fast it was happening anyways, right? When we made it faster, right? How much of it percent more than the natural increase was there going to be? And so liberals don't understand that this is actually how these climate science deniers are thinking. They just think you're a horrible person and you're absolutely stupid for denying this. I personally think that you're stupid for denying global warming because they call them greenhouse gases because they warm the planet, right? Add more greenhouse gases to do warm the planet. All right. Well, we're exponentially adding more and more of this CO2 gas. So obviously, at some point in time with exponential increase, we're going to hit a point where it's very bad. I mean, anybody in their right mind would say, okay, well, we can't just burn everything in the entire world at one time or everybody's going to die. Obviously. So, I mean, we do have to be pragmatic. We also have to, we can't just like shut everything down right at once. We have to transition. So that's the same, we got to have we got to use this COVID-19 to develop a smarter way to transition from one economy to the other, because the fact is, a lot of people just go to businesses because it's just been a thing that they did for a long time. If they could work from home half of the time, they would be a happier person and they would be a more productive person. So let's try to take this as a benefit. Let's turn that minus into a plus by turning the frown upside down. And let's make this a catalyst for us to be able to have a more agile society that is capable of changing to where we're not so living paycheck to paycheck and reliant on the landlord and these crappy jobs that you're probably going to get fired from because either you slept with another employee or somebody fired you for sexual harassment or because they thought you were racist or you posted something on the social media they didn't like. It's best to not be reliant on these people because these people will turn on you. They will actually blacklist you based off of a perceived racist tweet because you made a joke about someone of a different race. For instance, a recent joke that I made was that sometimes African-American women complain about how over-sexualization of the black woman. And really what this is it's actually code word for, it means one of four different things. It means, one, she just got used for sex by Tyrone, and he just broke up with her. Two, it means that white dudes are hitting on her. Three, it means that her husband just messed up and he's on the couch now and he is not getting any ass until he does what she says. Or three, it means she's nobody is giving her any dick. Ooh, we see through it. We see through it. But, you know, people on Twitter, they would hear that. But it's like, you're racist. Oh, my God. You're like, it's a joke about feminists, first off. Second off, it's goddamn true, so it's funny. You got to listen to the code word. They say one thing, but they actually mean another. But look at this. We got... we got problems with this COVID-19. Like this next article here from NPR, why even a huge medical supply stockpile will be of limited use against COVID-19. The U.S. has an $8 billion stockpile of emergency medical supplies that is the envy of the world, but vast collection will be of only limited use in the fight against the new coronavirus. The Wu flu, as it is being called. And no, it is not racist to call it the Wu flu or Wuhan virus because the fact of the matter is that Wuhan is a town. It is not a race of people. Thank you very much. But it is factually incorrect because it did not actually come from Wuhan. It actually came from somewhere else and was brought to Wuhan. But Wu flu is very funny to say, and it is the proper thing to do to check the lefties whenever they're trying to say stuff like this, because they will try to control your speech because they don't want to offend anybody, and it will end up being a slippery slope into absurdity. Next article from Reuters. 3 American troops wounded in rocket attack in Iraq, U.S. officials say. The troops were wounded in Iraq on the same base where an Iran-backed militia struck on Wednesday, killing 2 Americans and a British soldier. U.S. officials told Reuters on Saturday. And there's been talk about, I don't want to quote which articles I've read recently, but there was, this is could be war-provoking right here. Luckily, Donald Trump is not a warmonger. You know, as much as the lefties like to demonize Donald Trump because they said he was going to start World War III, and the lefties were prepared to have a civil war with the people on the right because they thought Donald Trump was a secret Russian agent. Yes, you heard that right. Our president of the United States was a undercover secret Russian agent to these people. And they had this broadcasted all over the MSNBC with Rachel Maddow every single night just drumming this conspiracy beat because it pushed her ratings through the roof. You got to watch out for this stuff. They do that. I am going to read 3 more, and then, hold on. Yeah, 4 more, because we got to shame Donald Trump here. Next article from the New York Post. Bernie Bros warns of massive exodus if Democrats nominate Joe Biden. The Bernie Bros, as in the people who have been burning down Republican campaign offices and have videos of Bernie campaign managers talking about locking up Republicans in gulags if Bernie is elected. These people, they say that Bernie is going to have an exodus. All right. Obviously, they're not in the party because they actually believe that. They don't really actually align with the policies. They're just there because they think they're going to get free stuff and that people will like them if they vote that way. And if they do virtue signaling. Virtue signaling actually does work to get you a crowd. I am trying to grow my Twitter, and I'm definitely having a dramatically higher rate when I can actually virtue signal about my conservative beliefs on Twitter. But it's bad because this people on Twitter, they just they block it, like the lefties, they end up blocking out anybody that disagrees with them because they can't hold down an argument. And then they get radicalized because they think all their friends are believing with them, believe everything that they say because they blocked out all of the opposing voices. And they have to do that because if you are in their feed, you are competition to them. They have to, in order to keep up, because I'm into C++ and engineering, so I got to circulate in the engineering community up here on Twitter. And engaging in conservative politics and Twitter at the same time is shitting where you eat. Or tech Twitter is shitting where you eat. Because most of the people are radical lefties. And then the guys end up being really conservative because they're the kind of guys who tried really hard and they want to have the wife and the family and they have the nice job and they can afford that. So they actually are really conservative, but they tricked everybody to think that they're liberal because the corporations are liberal because the radical lefties will outrage them, boycott their business, they'll target them, and they'll harass them on social media. And when they see people liking posts in an echo chamber, that it tends to sway their mind about it. It gets them to vote for something that is absolutely nonsense because other people get angry because these people violated the morals. Back to that Steven Pinker thing, where the left is to be able to control your mind by showing you what you should think, by showing you what you should be angry about. You have to watch out for this. It is extremely dangerous. When somebody is trying to get you to change your opinion and not like somebody or a group of people because they're angry because this person did this, or that. And in reality, if you actually would just not even pay attention to it, it's not even that big of a deal. Nobody would even remember it. But to these people, it's a really big deal, and they don't give up the fight. These are the Bernie Bros. These are the people that will put you in a gulag if elected. Most conservatives would say, most people would say there would be an exodus from the Democratic Party if they put a communist up on the as their front runner, right? That's most sane, rational people would say this guy's way too close to commies. His supporters, Bernie Bros, are communists. Next article from Newsweek: Coronavirus adds U.S. virus adds UK, England, and Ireland. UK, Ireland to European travel ban. The United Kingdom and Ireland have been added to the travel ban amid coronavirus spread. The White House confirmed on Saturday. And coming next, we're going to be building a wall on the East Coast to keep those filthy Irish immigrants out that are coming to steal our jobs and turn our country Irish. I'm joking. Build the wall. Yeah, I'm joking. No, man. Like after Brexit, UK and Ireland are they are our allies. Like they don't have as close a ties with Europe right now. So this is time for the US to step in and just be best buds and allies and trading partners with these people. So it sucks we got a travel ban, but you know what? Build that wall, baby. Just, can't just target it against the people in the southern border. Nah. All around the country, baby. Keep them Canadians out. We're talking wall all the way up and down the East Coast. Keep them Europeans out. Yeah. I mean, I know it doesn't make any sense because you can fly in, right? But hey, you get the point, right? Next article from New York Post. Coronavirus won't bar immigrants from getting green cards. A new rule that disqualifies immigrants who use government benefits from getting green cards will not apply to people who are seeking testing for care or for the new coronavirus. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services said late Friday seeking treatment for preventative services won't affect somebody's immigration status under the rule, which took effect last month after ... So I'm very much so against giving health care to immigrants because socialism causes people to breed. I mean, they should not. It's you should compete, especially because it makes everything better. Your life is better. And socialism, when you, like in the California, the percent of babies born in the U.S. right now is 25.9% of babies born are from immigrants. Yes, I know. That is crazy, right? It used to be 5%. And then in California, it's 47.1%, almost 50%. Almost half the babies born in California are from immigrants. Let's go look at California is a sanctuary state. Look at Texas, another border state right along the border. The percent of babies born from immigrants is 34.9%, significantly lower than that of California. So why is California so high? Because they have socialism. They give socialism to the immigrants. And when the vast majority of the immigrants coming in are poor, they would need food stamps. They would be on these things. We're talking like 10 million people. 10.5 million illegal immigrants. And there's 500,000, there's 550,000 homeless people on any given night. So basically for every single homeless person on the street, there is 10 illegal immigrants and there's 10 legal immigrants. Oh, no, hold on. No, there's 20 illegal immigrants for every homeless person and 10 of them are from Mexico. Yeah, that's it. Half of these illegal immigrants are from Mexico. And they're getting all this socialism. And then all of a sudden, now it's biased against us. Now all of a sudden, half of the people being born, more than half. If you look at the age group, it actually was over the 6 to 17. So this was a while ago. And the numbers have been going down. And the Latinos who have been moving here, their family structure is turning more American. So it's not all bad. But, as an American, what you're supposed to be thinking as a man is you're like, oh, sexy senoritas. Yeah. So many of them, a quarter of them are of our population's now Latino. So I should have a hot Latina girlfriend, right? No, it's not happening because they're in a different community than you. They're isolated. They didn't integrate into your community. But they should not give them health care, no socialism. But for our own health, they are a infection vector of the pandemic. So in this particular case, yes, we should definitely give them screenings for it so that it doesn't affect us, so that we can lower that curve, because it does make sense for us to do that. We're going to have one more article here from the New York Post, and then I'm logging out. It's it says White House begins scanning visitors for fevers in coronavirus crackdown. Shame on Donald Trump. Shame on Donald Trump. He should have cracked down the moment there was a potential pandemic. He messed up. I'm going to have to say that's a pretty big ding on there on his ability to handle the coronavirus. He's not even handling it in his own White House. Mike Pence is in there. Mike Pence is there. This is not Donald Trump's responsibility. It's Mike Pence's responsibility. He's the one. He's supposed to be watching. He's supposed to have the president's back. If the president doesn't do it, it's Mike Pence's responsibility to delegate it to somebody else to have it done or do it himself. But yeah, they should have gotten that a while ago. But of course, Joe Biden's seizing on this. Even though Joe Biden is having signs of dementia, like his campaign staff, his speechwriters have had to cut the speeches by 25%. And that might actually be a good strategy. But as to whether or not you could say whether or not age affects your ability to be a good president, I used to actually think that the older people would be horrible at being presidents. But if you actually look at the list of the best and worst presidents, what you'll see is that there's actually pretty even spread, actually, and some of the worst presidents were the younger ones. So we have to. This is a pattern that we need to observe here, because just because they're not good, nobody's good at absolutely everything. Donald Trump is supposed to have a good team, and then his team is supposed to do it. Donald Trump is a good people person. He is a good people person. There's no doubt. There's no questioning that one. But so can you say, should we reelect him because he did a bad job, because he didn't get testing in time? Yeah, you got to take the good and the bad and the ugly, dude, because illegal immigration is down 80% under Donald Trump. It's 80%. And legal immigration too is down. Don't quote me. I think it's somewhere around 20%. It's down 20%. And all from South American countries don't want to come here. People aren't coming down. And then that remain in Mexico policy was awesome. The left hates Donald Trump for this. They're like, Donald Trump's bad because he put kids in cages. Like, dude, those cages were there from the Obama administration, dude. The reason why, dude, I got an 11-year-old son, dude. He loves little cages. He will do a 24-hour challenge in a dog cage. No problem, dude. He'll just sit there lapping it up all night. I don't understand. These kids on YouTube are obsessed with these 24-hour challenges, dude. My son will sit there in a box, a medium-sized Home Depot box, dude, all night, dude. These kids are weird, dude. So you're like, oh, he's bad for kids in cages. Like, dude, come on, man. The people overwhelmed, they're flooded through. They're all committing crimes. Some stuff happened, they shamed them publicly. It's better now. It was happening when Obama was there. The only reason why it happened is because the migrant caravans have been getting up to numbers of thousands. They used to not be thousands of people coming through at once, but now thousands of people are coming through at once. And then now you have a situation where the kids end up in the cages. It's debatable whether or not they were having a good or a bad time. We need facts here, not opinions. But, it's good. We should be securing our borders, our southern borders, in order to prevent this and other pandemics from coming through. Because 4 in 5 border crossers are not apprehended. Only 1/5 of them are apprehended. Dude, those numbers are pathetic. Absolutely horrible numbers. We need to get that up to at least 4/5 are apprehended and 1 in 5 gets through it. Let's go to 100%. But we still need to build that wall on the East Coast to keep out all those filthy European immigrants coming to steal our jobs. I'm joking. Build a wall between here and Canada. But you look at the immigration numbers and like, there's no problem with Canadians that immigrating to the U.S. All these people immigrating are from countries like 25% of them from Mexico, and then 25% of them from South America, and then most of the people like Brazil. Most of the people in South America are in Brazil, but like hardly anyone. The same number of people from Brazil immigrate up to here than Canada, which is a small fraction of the size. Canada's like 50 million people. Brazil's like bigger than the U.S. And there's about the same amount of people coming through. So it's coming from these gang-ridden areas, and they're all saying they got asylum claims. And Donald Trump did a really good job with everything he did, and all the liberals were freaking out, saying this guy is a sexist, racist pig because he said grab her by the pussy, and because he doesn't go along with everything the Democrats want, all their bullshit that they want to push. And then as it turns out, the left is violent. But anyways, that's it for today. I'm over time. You've been watching Kale McCullough, host of Real Simple News and captain of the Kabuki Starship. Read you RSS news articles and comment them and criticize them. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, aloha, sayonara, farewell, and peace be with you in your journeys.